in all kinds of ways, I think this has been rather a healthy general election.
Looking forward to it as well.
Domestically, Labour's offering a form of socialism. The Conservatives are offering an ameliorated form of capitalism. There's a real choice. Overseas, likewise, you've got a Conservative Party which is unapologetic for the system of alliances in the Gulf and British foreign policy, but you've got a fascinating foreign policy critique from Corbyn and Labour, and so you've got a choice, and the voters have got a choice, and I think that's extremely healthy.
Mr. Speaker, the election on the 8th of June is a choice.
I don't think there's any doubt at all that the Conservatives are neglectful of the British Muslim community. I'm not sure they really want Muslim votes, to be quite honest. It's very important to note that Crosby Textor, the political strategist firm which advised Zach Goldsmith on his appalling campaign last year, 2016, to become Mayor of London.
In recent days, Sadiq Khan and his supporters have accused my campaign of being Islamophobic.
Has been retained for the general election, and Mr. Goldsmith has been forgiven, not just for his awful campaign, with all of its sort of anti-Muslim implications, but he's also been forgiven for running as an independent against his own party. There's no limit to the forgiveness for Mr. Zach Goldsmith. Meanwhile, how many Muslims are running as prospective Tory candidates? But insofar as you vote as a Muslim, it's very hard to see how you would vote for the Conservative Party rather than Labour or the Lib Dems. The events in Manchester came just as the general election campaign proper started, and there is a very important debate to be had about what lies behind these bombings. It's one thing, and they're quite right to it, just to condemn them, the bombing, mourn the dead and the injured, and to say what a terrible thing has happened and it's unforgivable.
This was among the worst terrorist incidents we have ever experienced in the United Kingdom.
But then you've got to have the deeper debate about what has lain behind it, and basically the Conservatives don't want to have that debate. They just say we support our security services, a terrible thing has happened. Labour, and it's very difficult to do in the atmosphere of an election, I think possibly impossible. Perhaps it would be wrong even to do it, but he's looking deeper to the foreign policy causes which may have brought about this horror.
We must be brave enough to admit that the war on terror is not working. We need a smarter way to reduce the threat from countries that nurture terrorists and generate terrorism.
I think you have to be very alarmed about British arms sales to Saudi Arabia just at the moment, and that's primarily because of what the Saudis are doing in the Yemen. And again, I would praise Jeremy Corbyn for raising that issue.
Isn't it about time this government suspended its arms sales to Saudi Arabia?
The Saudi-led coalition has been bombing indiscriminately, destroying thousands of lives, bombing markets, hospitals, schools, roads, houses, families, on a very large scale. And so Britain looks very complicit in what looks to me like an illegal war being waged by the Saudis, an illegal and murderous war being waged by the Saudis and their allies in the Yemen. And I think that's something which history might look back on and really condemn us terribly for.
We will be back at these dispatch boxes again. And the only question is, where will we be standing? Who will be Prime Minister of this great country?